Hi, everybody. My name is Raj Khera from morebusiness.com, and welcome to the podcast. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Jeff Kaplan. Jeff, a quick introduction.
Hey, how's it going, Raj? Great to see you again.
Good to see you. So just for background, everybody, this is my best friend for decades. Jeff and I actually met many years ago in Mrs. Lavick's sixth grade class when we both moved to the same neighborhood together. That was a while ago, and we have kept in touch, and we're very close. And as our careers have evolved, Jeff into executive coaching, mine into business, we actually found quite a few overlaps in what we're doing now. And today we'd like to talk about leading with purpose, because it's such an important part of management and success. And so Jeff, that's actually one of your keynote talks, Leading with Purpose. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that means to you?
Sure. Well, there's two aspects of it, right? So there's leading with purpose for yourself. Why do you do what you do, right? And then there's leading with the organization's purpose. And with regard to the second one, it's making sure that what you do, how you speak, how you make decisions is based on the organization's strategy, mission, vision, values, and priorities, as well as its employees. With regard to the first one about purpose, about your purpose, whenever I do a training, I always put like the mission, the values, and the vision of the organization as like the second slide, right? And I encourage leaders to every meeting they have to make sure that they're reminding folks all the way throughout the sort of chain of command to help connect the purpose of what they do and how it serves the larger organization or its mission.
Well, that's really important, is to make sure that the purpose is really something that resonates with yourself. Is there some overlap between passion and purpose, or like how does someone define what their purpose is? Because sometimes we feel a little bit lost, honestly. How do you find what your purpose is?
Well, it's funny you say that. I think particularly in the last couple of years, I think more and more people are feeling lost. I mean, one of the things I think the Great Recession has done is it's had people reevaluate. I can't tell you how many people, including 2 days ago, have been telling me lately that they're reevaluating. They want to do what they've been doing, if they want to work where they've been working. So it's a great question. Many years ago, I used to recommend this book, The Calling, which was really it was a book about, but also exercises to really get in touch with your calling. So one of the things I would recommend to folks is connect with a coach, or it could even be like a friend or colleague, like sort of like in our relationship, and really, ask somebody like, why do you do what you do? And then like, well, what's important about that? And, sometimes by asking the question, well, why, even though why is usually not a great question. In this context, it's a fantastic question, because if you keep asking the different levels, eventually you get to the core of why you do what you do.
Mm-hmm. And so that ties back into the purpose, right? So how do you align your purpose with the larger purpose of the organization? Sometimes those don't fully align. So how do you find that common ground?
Yeah. So first, are you the CEO or are you somebody other than?
Well, let's say we're talking to the executives right now, and then maybe we'll have a follow-up on if you're not an executive.
Right. So, first thing before you even start with an organization, you want to check out their values, right? Their culture, not what they say it is, but what it really is. Talk to people on the ground floor. And obviously, if there's something that doesn't sit well, you need to kind of check that out, right?
It's funny you say that, Jeff, actually, because one of the things that I remember, when I was a CEO and I would interview people, the ones that I really wanted to hire would ask my staff, hey, what's Raj like to work with? And my staff would come back and say, well, so they're asking me what you would like to work with. And I'm like, well, I hope you're honest, first of all, because I don't want anybody to think one thing and then come in and experience something different. So that was actually really interesting. So that's a good question if people are thinking about asking, like, what is the CEO like to work with, right?
Well, right. It's the people and the culture that's embedded into the walls, right? Because
Yeah.
I say you want to find out, for example, about your reporting manager, but remember that can change in a blink of an eye. I can't tell you many people who, went to work for an organization because they really respected the leader, and then the leader was gone in 3 months, right? And so you really want to kind of check both things out. But it starts there. There are gray areas at times, right, where you may not be agree with, for example, all the decisions that come from the top. You might be thinking it's going the wrong direction. But, I would say at least 8 times out of 10, you should be able to resolve that. Right. And then, if you need more information, if you need to have a conversation with the decision maker, because at some point you need to embrace the direction if you're not the decision maker. Yeah. Right. And then you need to be all in. If you can't do that, then you need to be honest about that, both with the organization and yourself, and you need to start looking for a plan B.
Let's take a deeper dive into leading with purpose then. So how do you know that you're on purpose? How do you know when you're not on purpose?
So first of all, 44% of organizations, people in organizations say that they lead with purpose, which leaves 56% that aren't. So again, going back to the organizational purpose, like you're making decisions, quite frankly, thousands of decisions every day. And leaders who make purposeful decisions are doing so with respect to, well, what's the mission of the organization? Like, what are we up to here? Why are we here? Why do we exist? Right. And what are their values? Like we say that these are our top 3 values, for example. Right. So an example very recently is the CEO of a construction company, $500 million construction company in the Northeast, decided he was going to change the helmets that the pavers wore when they were out on a job, right? They had helmets, right? And the helmets had been industry standard and fine. They met all the requirements. But these new helmets, which by the way, cost almost twice as much, and by the way, were really uncomfortable to wear at first. They were just a little bit better in terms of protecting one's head in the event of impact or a fall. As a result of that decision, one of my clients was telling me on a call that we had not too long ago, he's like, yeah, one of my pavers had a car barreling at him about 50 miles per hour. Guy went flying into the air, came crashing down. Guy was in the hospital recovering from his injuries. Those accidents, unfortunately, happen more than one might think, or certainly hope, but they're usually fatal. This one wasn't, because the CEO made a decision that valued safety, which is one of the company's top 3 values, over cost or convenience. That, my friend, is an example of leading with purpose.
Leading with purpose. That's a great story. And then, so, you mentioned that those like 44% of people say that they do lead with purpose. How do you know? Like, how do you know? Because that's, sometimes we might...
when you don't. Sorry to cut you off, but when you don't, right?
Okay.
Apathy, right? Apathy. So there's 2 versions of the stone cutter story from ancient times. I think one came from China. I remember where the other one came from. But one version is where this guy's walking along and a bunch of these people sort of like just, out there sweating it out 14 hours a day, hot weather, cutting stone. And he asked this, sort of grumpy, miserable employee. And by the way, if you're grumpy and miserable every day at work, you know that you're probably not leading or working with purpose. What is he doing? And he says, I'm cutting stone. And then he went to the second guy who's doing the same job. But this guy had a little bit more of a smile. It was a little bit lighter. He said, what are you doing? He says, I'm cutting stone in order to make, money to support my family, right? So obviously family is a value. And he was able to sort of link, he wasn't really doing something that felt purposeful, except for it had a purpose connected to it, right? So minimally, you want to connect something that's important to you with the job that you're doing. That's sort of like the second idea. But the first is he went to the third guy and he's like singing and jovial and was asked the question, like, what are you doing? And he was like so happy. And he said, I'm making a cathedral.
Oh,
right. Exactly.
Yeah. It really connected with the purpose. He was really joyful that he was, he understood the big picture and his role in it.
Yes. And so as the leader, like it's your job, like, do the town hall and say, everybody see this picture. This is what you're doing. Yeah. Right. And this is the purpose it's going to serve. And here's why it's important to us. And here's why it's important to the end user. Right. And then finding different ways every day to help people all, again, at all levels of the organization and across roles and responsibilities, to link what they do with the larger purpose. Now, listen, I get it. It can feel different if you're making decisions about sort of which populations to say yes to and which to say no to in terms of support versus, say, sweeping the floors. But even the person who's sweeping the floors, right, has a huge purpose. I can tell you, for example, when I go into a restaurant and, I'm served great food, right, everybody in that restaurant serves a purpose that is helping me be happy in that moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So there's a leading with purpose that way too. So now tell me, give me an example of what leading. So you gave the story of the helmets. So clearly the one of the company's values was safety. How do you get your entire team, your entire staff to really embrace the purpose of the organization? So I've worked with lots of nonprofits, very purpose driven, very mission driven, and oftentimes the staff that's attracted to that organization has something, they're passionate about that mission too. In a corporate setting, that may be different. People
Sure.
may be going there because the company's paying a really high salary, or they got great options, or something that's like, they're maybe not quite connected with the passion that they want, but they're looking at it from a different perspective. How do you get everybody in the company, or as many as you can, I guess, especially in larger organizations, to really feel the purpose of the company?
Yeah, it's great. So first, I came to mind is show them, don't tell them, right? And there's different ways you can show them. So, Wegmans, it's been a while since I stopped tracking this. I know they're not number one right now, but they used to, for many years, be number one place to work, right? In terms of, satisfaction by the employees. And they're a good example where one way that they show them is they put the money where their mouth is, right? So everybody from, the top level executives down to the part-time high school student has some profit sharing into the organization, right? So that's one simple way that you can do it, is you can sort of share on the profits. Another one is to ask for their input, right? So as the CEO, one of my 5 tenets of a heart-based leader, one is purpose, but another one is engagement, right? And so as a CEO, are you sort of hiding out in the C-suite, and just meeting with, the folks at one level down, or are you out walking, if it's Walmart, are you walking into the grocery stores? If you're, manufacturing, are you visiting the different plants, right? And then are you going up to folks and saying, hey, the machinist, for example, like, how's it going? What's keeping you up at night? How can we support you? Tell me what's important to you, right? What's one change you think that we could make that would make your job easier, you would increase job satisfaction, but also would create greater efficiencies or, effectiveness in the work that we do, right? And so there's put your money where your mouth is, there's ask for input, but there's a lot of different ways. And I got to tell you there, Raj, it kind of starts with, who are you as a person, right? Because these things are pretty self-evident if you're somebody who has humility and cares deeply about the welfare of others, including the people that work in your organization. You will figure these things out. And even if you're not the most creative leader, you will ask people around you, hey, how can we, increase job satisfaction, for example?
Yeah, I think the whole idea of the management adage of management by walking around is really very valid. I know I used to do that all the time in my teams, and I would sometimes grab a Snickers bar and start just walking around the office and say, hey, how you doing? What's going on? What are you working on? And we would just sit down and literally half an hour later come out with like so many ideas, just simply by asking. Not a pre-scheduled meeting. Granted, this is much harder to do with the fact that we're like most of us are still virtual. Many of us are still virtual. But sometimes maybe scheduling some of those, hey, how are you doing? Check-in sessions are really, really important. So yeah, I take that point really well. I like it. What other kinds of things do leaders need to know to make sure that they're managing with purpose?
Well, first, they should ask themselves, right? So maybe start with checking how happy they are in what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And to ask themselves why, first of all, why did they get into that particular line of work to begin with. A lot of times, particularly when you're at the executive levels, because somebody started, lower in the ranks, let's say it's a large organization, right? And so whether they're, starting engineering or hospitality or, whatever, and then they work their way up. So, I do a lot of work in academic healthcare. And so a lot of leaders are, right, like folks that were clinicians, eons ago. And, it's clear why they got, into the field, right? But it's a whole different skill set and it's a whole different job, right? And so one of the things that I know a lot of senior either physician leaders or nurse leaders or others will do is they'll do something to try to stay connected to the work that they started with, right? Still doing some patient care and that kinds of thing. So one of the things I would say is that as an executive, if you can find a way to fill, I'll just make it up, 5 hours of your week with something that, whether you're washing the dishes or sweeping the floors or meeting with, patients or customers or whatever, I would highly, highly encourage you to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I know a lot of CEOs they'll manage a help desk line for an hour, a couple hours or something a week, just to hear what the customers are saying, just to experience what the front line is actually going through. So that's
yeah. And be with them, not even just hear them, but just be with them. Yeah. Right. And not a checkoff list. Like I get, not everybody has an innate sense of like leading with purpose and leading with heart. Not everybody's in touch with their emotions and, and that's fine. And, a little bit, the analogy that's coming to me is like the spouse that gets angry said, we should always remember when our anniversary is. And it's like, and what I'm saying is like, yeah, but if dates aren't good for them, then they need to put it on the calendar, but they're putting it on the calendar and says, get flowers for spouse because they care, right? In all the things that they're juggling in their mind, it may not be the first thing, but because they care, they put it on their calendar, right? So I just want to say, so it might seem like a checkoff list, but if it's important enough, then they'll make sure that they do it regardless of whether it feels like they're just checking it off or whether they just remember automatically.
So there's lots of benefits to leading with purpose, right? And so, corporations are typically for profit. So they're looking to increase their margins, reduce their costs, reduce employee turnover. So there's a lot of implications of leading with purpose. So let's just talk about a couple of them. Like what does that do for retention?
Yeah. So retention's a big one. So I would tell you, for millennials, it's the number one link to retention. Them feeling their sense of purpose, feeling emotionally connected to the work and to their manager is the number one factor in whether or not they stay at a job.
And this is research based. This is not like someone.
This is one research, 67,000 folks, another, 38 countries. I mean, there's lots of research out there, and millennials right now make up more than half of the workforce. So, you better be paying attention to this stuff. If you're not now, you will soon, or your organization is probably not going to last very long.
Mm-hmm. And then there's other stuff that trickles down to the bottom line. So retention, clearly one, you reduce the cost of having to train new staff. You keep them, especially in light of the Great Resignation, which is really important to keep your best staff because they are getting offers. Whether you want to hear it or not, they are getting offers from other people. Everybody's getting called by recruiters. So you really got to keep an eye on it, keep them happy. But then that trickles to the bottom line too.
It does. Well, yeah. I mean, what you just mentioned, one way it trickles to the bottom line, but job satisfaction goes up, so performance goes up, right? So top line, bottom line, right? If you have, for example, happy salespeople, right, then that's a good thing, right? Just look at, just think of like some mom and pop, store. I can give you. I remember back when I was in my doctoral program. There was, the University of Maryland, where we both went. I'm sorry, my doctoral program was at Temple, but there was, a lot of food trucks, right? Like out across the campus, right? And I worked did some work at the health center, and right outside there was just like one of these new little small, very small, we'll call it trucks, right? And they served like bagels and coffee and stuff. And it was a married couple. And they were just so over the top happy, right? And they were just like so nice. And I said to my colleagues, I said, watch as this truck, as their customers would just continue, would just get like massive, like over time. And sure enough, in the first 2 years, like they had lines all over the place. It was bagels and coffee, right? You can get bagels and coffee all over the place, right? But it was like their, just, the way that they're, the happiness of the relationship. Well, fast forward, that they ended up not doing so well. In fact, they ended up closing down. And what happened was after 2 years, I guess in a confined space, don't know what was happening at home, but they started arguing and they were like, you could just, I mean, it was like, they were just not happy as a couple. And it came out to the point I remember, it just came to me now. This is many years ago. Like I wrote on a napkin, like some silly thing, like, I don't know, like, like it's all okay or something, like, and I literally hand them some note, like cheer up, it's okay. Like I was feeling bad for them. So the point being, right, like when you're happy with your job, with yourself, with the relationships at work, people, there's research out there that says if you have a best friend at work, higher job satisfaction, higher income, quite frankly, then people notice and the company does well.
Yeah. And quite the opposite if you're not really happy, because that'll affect the way you talk to your customers, the way you talk to your staff. I'm a big believer in making sure your staff is happy first, because your staff will then take care of your customers and retain them as well. It's just
it was it Herb Kelleher, Southwest Airlines? Oh no, it was Branson, the Virgin companies. He said customers come second, employees come first.
Yeah. Kelleher, I think, was also in the same, he had the same thought process.
Well, he was. So Keller, I in my keynote, and often I give this story, is actually, I read this story in a book called Perfectly Yourself by Matthew Kelly. Well, Keller, founder and former CEO of Southwest Airlines, he actually got a letter once from this disgruntled employee, right? And, Southwest, right? Like joking, and that kind of thing. Yeah. And this business traveler, I guess, didn't like the, play of the, student stewardesses, right? So he wrote a letter to CEO now who, just complaining. He thought it was unprofessional. Yeah. And Herb wrote back. I mean, he's kind of a busy guy, right? CEO. He actually writes back to this disgruntled employee. Yeah. And he stuck up for his employees with 4 simple words. Yeah. We will miss you. We'll miss you. I know the story is a fantastic story. And I think that is a perfect example of leading with purpose. So, well, exactly. Yes. Being really clear, right? Because their thing, they had 3, their top 3 values was, like happy, happy customers, time, right? Like being on time, right? And cheap and expensive flights. And real quick, and here, actually, this is a really good example. I said purpose is linked into decision making. So at one point, if you look at where they have hubs, you notice that they don't, I think they still don't have one in San Francisco. At least they didn't for the longest time. And they were offered to have a hub in San Francisco, which would have brought in, tons more revenue and all that kind of stuff. He chose not to do it. Why you want to guess why they chose not to do it? Tell me. Right. Well, there's a lot of fog in San Francisco, right? And so they couldn't guarantee being on time. And that was one of their top 3 values. But by knowing, again, remember mission, vision, values, purpose, and priorities, right? By knowing their top values, right? On time, happy, customers and cheap, like then even though that's going to bring in more money in the long term, it's going to water down our brand. So we said, no. This, is why understanding your purpose and aligning that with your decisions with that is so critical. I have a little story with that. A lot of times customers would come to us and, we built one of my last companies was an email marketing software platform, and we'd have customers requesting specific features. And we looked at those initially when we started getting these feature requests. We thought, oh, this is great. We're getting customer feedback on what they want. Let's build it out. And then that way we'll get more customers because probably they want it too. And we realized that that was the wrong move.
we realized what we really needed to do is just be true to the bulk of our customer base, not take one-on-one, like one-off requests from people. And so they would say, hey, we really need this feature, we need that feature. And we realized that for some customers, they are outgrowing us, and that's okay. Because what we found is if we were true to the customer base that we found to be our sweet spot, we actually found more people just like them, and we grew, ended up with tens of thousands of, actually like 70,000 users over a period of years. And that was because we stayed true to who we were and didn't dilute our products with all these extra bells and whistles that this customer or that customer and so on wanted. So we wanted to be very focused.
Before you go on, I just want to say, I mean, it's such a great point, right? Because it's both, right? And, we all know that listening to your customers is really important. And, but also, as the Herb Keller example, knowing who your customer is really important as well.
That is very,
right. And,
very, very true. Yeah.
And so, leading with purpose and living with purpose means being really clear what to say yes to and what to say no to in terms of opportunities.
So if there were a couple of key takeaways from our dialogue today, I think what you said was just one of them, right? Be really clear on what you can do, accept to do, and what you will say no to. I think really important.
Every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to everything else.
Yeah.
Right. And so so in your example, right, if you said yes to this particular feature, what's the negative impact? Every solution brings with it its own problems. Make sure that the problems it brings with it can either easily be solved, or B, if they can't be solved, but they can sort of be mitigated, make sure it doesn't water down your key purpose. I mean, if there's one, I know this whole thing is about purpose, but like when you think about the last, whatever it's been 40 minutes since we've been speaking, like it almost like a stack in the deck, it just gets more and more clear, like why purpose is so important, because it dictates the decisions that you make, which decides the sustainability or not of your company and job satisfaction and all the other good stuff that comes with aligning your purpose with the work.
Well, there you have it. Some useful points to consider if you're struggling with leading with purpose to help you get back on track. Jeff, thanks again for your time today. Really enjoyed our conversation, and we will connect soon.
Thanks. Great to be here, and I'll see you soon.